In regulated and compliance driven environments, what gaps or risks still exist in today's AI tooling? And which of those does this foundation help mitigate and which will take more time to mature, similar to what we have seen with Kubernetes?
There are a lot of parallels to the rise of cloud. I mean, it's not perfect, right? I mean, this is definitely a different thing. But one of the things that I think was interesting in the early cloud days was there was a lot of back and forth of like, people are going to go all public cloud, people are going to go all private cloud, people are going to go hybrid cloud. And, where it landed, which is pretty normal, is that people wound up using the right tool for the job. And there were, it was very clear, that people wanted to stop running their own Active Directory and their own email systems, right? I mean, what is the value to even a big bank of running their own mail server systems, right? I mean, that none of that provides any value to their business. If Microsoft's going to do it on your behalf and can provide you with the security guarantees that you need, then you're good to go. On the other hand, there were lots of workloads that are not leaving the bank, right? They're not going to take their financial transactions and stick them out on Google, right? Visa's not moving off their mainframes anytime soon. That's just not the way the world works. So what we see is that these new technology waves come and then people embrace them and figure out how to leverage them in ways that make sense for their business. And so I think we're kind of in the throes of that. But what people don't see, what they don't really understand is that it is early, early, early days. They think they get a little bit confused because ChatGPT, had this like massive ramp up on the B2C side. And that's great. And I wish them well. But I care more about B2B. I care more about enterprise, and the value that needs to be pulled out of AI for enterprises is less about like helping their coders write code. It's less about their marketing people writing prose. It's about them taking the data that makes them special and getting leverage out of that. It might be customer data. It might be the way they do customer support, whatever they hang their hat on, right? MBA teams have an identity. If you're in financial services, you have an identity within financial services. This is what we do. This is what we're great at. This is how we're differentiated. If you aren't applying AI into that area, then you're not getting out ahead of your competitors. And the reality is that we haven't even begun that phase. People are still, you talk about crawl, walk, run. Everybody's still in the crawl phase. We're just nudging up to kind of the walk phase. We're not even there yet. People are just figuring out like how to, train agentic engineers. They've done the basic around RAG and chatbots. And so, the gap is a gap in understanding, a gap in, you know, being able to identify the workloads and the places to get leverage and competitive advantage. Like people don't know what that is yet, right? I mean, if you go and you look at a lot of the financial services companies today, many of them, even though these are highly regulated industries, many of them run a lot of their workloads on the cloud now. They have very specific use cases where it made sense, and much of their workloads do not. They still have pets workloads, they have cattle workloads. I mean, it is all over the place and it is based off of need. And the problem is that we have not figured out yet, because it's early days, what should be AI transformed. Where should agents be deployed? What are the best practices for deploying agents? How do I protect my data? How do I have guarantees against hallucinations? How do I make sure there's no PII data leakage? When do I use an internal on-prem open source or open weight LLM? When do I use one off-prem? How do I have guarantees about when things are being used, whether it's on-prem or off-prem? How do I look at a more complex agentic workflow and measure it? How do I deploy evaluations and know its performance, right? In the past, we had A/B testing with websites. You do A/B testing, you can look at it, you can say, okay, this one increased, transactions per second by this amount, the web page is loaded this much faster, da 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 da. Doing that with agents is much, much harder. It's much more subjective, right? How you measure and evaluate performance and accuracy is very different. All of that stuff is very nascent. And that doesn't even go on to some of the hardest problems, which are like, how do you make your data clean? How do you do data labeling? How do you make sure that, with an AI system, it's garbage in, garbage out? What's the best way to handle things? Do you take, existing models and fine tune them? Do you deploy RAG? Do you do some combination? Do you train your own models in some instances where you've got a specialized use case? Maybe it's not large language model. Maybe it's a small vision model because you've got a problem where you've got to do things with CCTVs. I mean, all of that stuff is completely nascent. We're at the very beginning, and people are not going to figure it out except the way that they always have, which is trial and error. And I hate to say it because people always want to find some shortcut, but the reality is that it's always been trial and error. It always will be trial and error because there's just times where you don't know what you don't know until you go through the process. And this is why I sort of encourage people to kind of come in and be involved with something like the foundation, the new Agentic AI Foundation, because it is by being in that group of people where people are doing their experiments where the value of the community really comes through, because then you're talking to the other financial services or healthcare or construction companies or whomever that are around the table, and they're all trying experiments, and then you're learning from each other what's working for you, what's not working for me, and you're trading that information at the same time that you're working together around open source in that ecosystem. That learning, that's what gets us through, right? So we've got to compete, but we've also got to cooperate because we need those set of best practices. We need the set of patterns that work with agents and AI so that we can all be successful.
Now let's talk about Mirantis. You folks have deep roots in open source infrastructure all the way from OpenStack to today's Kubernetes. Given the opportunities emerging around agentic AI, where do you see Mirantis contributing to or leveraging this new open ecosystem?
So we have a lot of different ways that we're looking at this. So obviously, in the past, we've been more of an open source infrastructure company, and we're still doing a bunch there. We've got some really exciting things that we'll be announcing over the course of next year. And that's still sort of a major piece of what we're working on. Another kind of big piece of what we're working on is trying to figure out how to go with our existing customers on their agentic journey, particularly around our products. As I said, we're looking at providing MCP capability across the entire product portfolio. Our customers are already looking into ways to basically deploy agents. A lot of their concerns tend to be around operations, not software development. This is an area where agents haven't been deployed very successfully yet. You see a runaway train around development, but not so much around doing operations, especially on Kubernetes. We think that customers want to figure out how to get operational leverage. One of the things that's very interesting historically is that operators are overworked and just in a position where they spend so much time firefighting, collecting data, dealing with outages, doing root cause analysis. These are all things that actually agents can provide immense value for. And I think then operators can be focused on the thing that makes them special, which is being experts on their own business processes and systems, and then they're orchestrating agents to basically help them. So it's more like an operator is kind of puppet master who basically has agents working on their behalf to help them do root cause analysis and correlation and figure out what's going on with different products and problems in production. And that's a whole area that's nascent where I think people can get a lot of leverage. We're working with our existing customers around that to help them in that area. And then last but not least, we have some aspirations to go up the stack a little bit. We still are fundamentally an open source kind of infrastructure company, but we have kind of gone up the stack a little bit at a time every time, from OpenStack, which was infrastructure as a service, to Kubernetes, which is containers, infrastructure for containers. And we have intentions to go up and provide infrastructure for agents. That's something that myself and my team are working actively on. We think it's really early. We've seen a lot of people placing bets on products already for agent infrastructure, and we think it's far too early to deploy a product. So we're not doing that. Instead, we're leading with services, as we did with OpenStack, as we did with Cloud Native and Kubernetes. That's why we announced our MCP AdaptiveOps services offering. I'm going to be dropping new information on that this week or next. I got a data sheet of all of our services, an explanation of our agentic maturity model, and how we help people develop agents and MCP servers. We've been doing that inside the business for over a year now. We've been doing that for some of our customers. So we've done a ton of learning about what works and what doesn't work. And we're going to help enterprises cross the AI chasm by providing, kind of baked blueprints, open source blueprints that basically help people deploy and manage agents and MCP servers in a secure way in production with high levels of confidence. And I've got a whole bunch of announcements that'll be coming out over the next few months in that regard.